Good morning, everyone. Last November, this office announced the creation of a conviction review unit to identify, remedy, and safeguard against the rare but unacceptable event of wrongful conviction. Last month, we disclosed that our conviction review unit was reviewing cases in connection with a Tampa Police Department investigation that resulted in the termination of 3 officers for a pattern of misconduct. I'm here today to announce the findings of that review. With that context in mind, let me explain how we got here today. In November 2018, TPD informed us that it was investigating several officers for possible violations of internal protocol. We began evaluating our prosecution of cases involving the officers under investigation. In April 2019, TPD informed us that its investigation had revealed that officers John Lorata, Mark Landry, and Algenis Maceo had engaged in a pattern of misconduct in which they failed to document detentions of suspects and seizures of evidence. As a result, our office voluntarily dismissed 5 pending cases where one or more of those officers was essential to the prosecution. We determined that the officers' credibility was damaged so much that we could not go forward in those cases. Around the same time, our conviction review unit took the proactive and unprecedented step of reviewing closed cases involving those officers, going all the way back to January of 2018. For the last 2 months, our conviction review unit has conducted an exhaustive review of 225 felony and juvenile cases and presented its findings to our independent review panel. There were 2 purposes to that review. First, to determine whether any of the 3 officers were essential to those cases, and second, to evaluate whether there was independent evidence apart from the officer's testimony to establish that a crime occurred. We identified 17 closed cases where convictions were based on the officer's testimony. These convictions cannot stand. We cannot, in good faith, uphold convictions based exclusively on the words of those officers. As a result, there's simply no credible evidence to sustain the convictions in those cases. Ultimately, we have lost confidence in the integrity of the convictions, and we are promptly moving to vacate the convictions in all 17 cases. Each of the 17 cases involves a defendant who is subjected to a patrol stop and seizure by one or more of the 3 officers. None of the cases involves victims. The offenses, all adult felonies, include possession of marijuana, possession of a controlled substance, possession of a firearm by a felon, or concealed firearm. All 17 of the defendants pleaded guilty, and none is presently incarcerated. We're in the process of contacting each defense attorney to inform them of our findings and to begin the judicial process of vacating the convictions. Our obligation to pursue justice does not end when a case is closed. As I've said before, one wrongful conviction is too many. To let any of these convictions stand would undermine what we stand for, a fair and just system that advances public safety. This decision reflects our commitment to root out wrongful convictions, whether the defendants are factually innocent or whether the process used to obtain those convictions violated basic principles of due process and fairness. I want to acknowledge Assistant State Attorney Teresa Hall, who leads our conviction review unit, and her incredible team for the tremendous work they did in helping us to reach the right results in these cases. I also want to thank our independent review panel of Justice Peggy Quince, Judge Chris Altenburn, and Judge E.J. Salsinas. Their input on the process we used to evaluate these cases was invaluable as we were navigating this uncharted territory. I want to thank Chief Dugan for promptly bringing TPD's internal investigation to our attention and for his support as our office has worked to achieve the right results in these cases. Lastly, I encourage anyone who believes that they have a case appropriate for review by our conviction review unit involving any of these officers to submit a petition for review to our office. Those petitions and other information about the operation of our conviction review unit are available at our website, www.sao13th.com. Again, www.sao13th.com. At this time, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Mr. Warren, I wanted to be clear. So all of these cases, these convictions are factual, or are they all process? Is that what's the problem?
So our review was focused on the process. The process has to be legitimate. The process has to have integrity. So the decision here was based on a process that violated basic standards of due process and fairness because of a lack of credibility with these three officers.
Do you expect more cases?
TPD's investigation went into 2018. We went all the way back to January of 2018 to be overly inclusive. We recognize the possibility that there may be cases from before 2018, but this was a massive project to review 225 cases, but that's why we're encouraging individuals to come forward if they believe that they have a case that's ripe for review by our conviction review unit.
Did all of these cases involve body cams?
The focus was on the officer's detention and the retrieval of evidence. Often what was happening was they were disposing and not documenting small amounts of drugs. So it's not so much an issue of body cams, it's about the failure to follow protocols. That was the pattern of misconduct.
But were there body cams in some or most of these cases?
There were body cams in several of the cases.
Chief Dugan, can we ask you a quick question as well?
Certainly.
Initially, when this happened, you said it was an embarrassment to the department. What are your feelings today, knowing that these 17 cases are now being
You know, it's obviously, and I think that's a very fair question. It's obviously very awkward and embarrassing for me to be here today. You know, the only thing I can do to these officers is fire them, and that's what we've done. You know, I have taken the time to conduct lengthy roll call sessions with the officers to explain to our current patrolmen and the entire department that this type of behavior is unacceptable, and that they better act with character and integrity, else I'll fire them too. You know, it's disappointing, and I apologize to the members of the court who have, quite frankly, now wasted their time in prosecuting these cases, from the judges who have heard them, to the defense attorneys, to the prosecutors. It has just created quite the quagmire of red tape, and I commend Andrew Warren for his work on this.
You said all you can do is fire them. Mr. Warren, is there something else you can do to these police officers? Are you looking at criminal conduct?
The evidence we saw established a pattern of misconduct involving violations of internal regulations. We did not see evidence of the officers committing crimes. This is a question of the officer's credibility, not criminality.
Mr. Warren, I believe these officers are trying to get their jobs back through their due process rights through the city and the union. If they should be successful, what will happen then as far as prosecuting cases they bring to your office?
Well, the administrative process that they're going through is, of course, outside our jurisdiction and concern. To the extent that the officers are reinstated, we would evaluate their testimony, and we're going forward the same way we do for all law enforcement officers, with a higher standard than that of the typical witness, because we believe in holding law enforcement to a higher standard of integrity and professionalism.
Do you by chance know how much money, I guess, was spent in prosecuting some of these cases that you got to go around? You got to go back and vacate the conviction?
I don't. This was 17 cases out of about 70,000 that come through this office. More time was spent not only on prosecuting the cases, but also on the review. But we're willing to invest that time to get to the right outcome, to do the just and right thing here.
Can you give us an example of maybe one or a couple of the cases and what the circumstances were, and if any of them were particularly egregious cases?
Well, the cases were typically, as I said, involving felony possession of marijuana, felony possession of other controlled substance. There were a couple cases involving firearms. It was typically a patrol stop, as we talked about. And the critical factor was where we didn't have independent evidence to corroborate that a crime occurred outside of the officer's testimony. That's why we lost confidence in the integrity of those convictions.
They were, in one case, we were told he turned off, one of the officers turned off his body camera. How do you know to do that?
I'm not sure how the officers knew to do what they were doing. Our focus is on the process from the time those cases came into our office based on the credibility of the officers and our ability to justly and fairly prosecute the case and hold people accountable.
Are you looking into that?
Looking into,
Further, why they behaved the way they did in some of these stops?
I believe that's something that TPD's looked into as part of their internal investigation. And again, any violation of TPD regulations would be something handled in the civil context, not in the criminal.
So, just to be clear, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are we saying this is pretty much wrapped up, this is it?
Well, we've wrapped up with regard to these 225 cases that we've reviewed. But as I've said a couple times, we are open to the possibility that there are other similar cases out there that predate January of 2018 that our conviction review unit exists to look at.
For any of these people that you contacted that their convictions were overturned, and any of their lawyers said that if they're going to sue the city, the state, anything like that, or they're going?
Our contact has been with defense counsel because that's how the protocol works. We don't reach out directly to defendants. So at this point, we've been alerting defense counsel as to the process and what the steps are going forward to vacate those convictions through the judicial process.
Did you alert the counsel for the officers?
We've been in contact with Tampa Police Department investigation as well as with the PBA who represents the officers.
Do you plan to do this with any other cases, like other officers unrelated to this who have been fired?
At this point, no. Again, our conviction review unit exists to review convictions where there's a question about the integrity of that conviction. As we become aware of more cases, whether it's from a law enforcement issue, whether it's an evidentiary issue, whether it's an expert or forensic issue, that's what our conviction review unit is here to do.
Are you able to publicly disclose the names of the people who will have their convictions overturned today?
We do. We have a list of all 17 cases with the names of the defendants and the case numbers available to the press.
Was there a particular reason you only went back to January 2018?
Sure. So the TPD investigation focused on 2018, and their results, I believe, started in May of 2018. So we went back to January 2018 to be overly inclusive.
So just to be clear, these 17 cases, the defendants aren't necessarily innocent victims. They could be just that you cannot corroborate what the officers said in the cases?
That's correct. In these cases, the 17 defendants, we are not opining, and we did not evaluate based on their factual innocence, only on their legal innocence. And it's an important distinction because not only should someone be factually guilty, they need to be legally guilty as established through the process with all the constitutional protections that they have. Here, where those principles of due process were violated, the right thing to do is to vacate the convictions.
So the only thing you had on these cases is just the officers' words, no body cam, nothing else to corroborate?
Essentially, yes. The evidence that was used against the defendants was largely, if not exclusively, officers' testimony without independent evidence to establish that a crime occurred.
And because, in your opinion, their word is shaky at best, you had to vacate these convictions.
Because, in our opinion, their credibility was compromised, the right thing to do is to vacate the convictions, and that's exactly what we did.
Can you explain just your thought process on why you created this new committee?
We established the conviction review unit, as I said, to identify, to remedy, and to safeguard against wrongful convictions. I've said clearly before that our duty to pursue justice doesn't end when the case is closed. It doesn't stop at the doors of the courthouse. We have an ongoing obligation to seek justice, not convictions. And this is an example of the fantastic work that our conviction review unit has been doing and will continue to do for many years ahead.
One more question, last question.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.